Today is November 18th, 2021. My name is Luciana Spraker. I'm the director of the City of Savannah's Municipal Archives, and I'm with Roy Jackson, former City of Savannah Alderman. We are sitting in the council chamber in Savannah City Hall today for our interview. Thank you for joining me today, Mr. Jackson. We're going to start off with some background questions and then talk about your time with the city as an alderman.
Okay.
Okay. So let's start with, what's your full name?
It is Roy L. Jackson.
Okay. What's the L stand for?
Louis.
Say it again.
Louis.
Louis, okay. When and where were you born?
I was born in 1942 in Scriven County, which the seat, of course, is Sylvania, Georgia.
Okay. So when did you move to Savannah?
In 1968.
So you spent most of your childhood then in Sylvania?
It's kind of in between. I was like 12, 13 years old when my father moved to Savannah. Yeah.
Why did he move to Savannah?
Well, got enough of the country living, and I guess it was a little more than that. All of his sons had grown older, and they kind of wanted to give up the country living, and all of their friends and relatives were in town, were living in Savannah. Okay. So they gravitated to Savannah one by one, and just left he and I, in terms of the males in the family there, and so we just kind of followed.
Okay.
Yes.
So how old were you when you moved to Savannah?
12, 13, something like that.
Okay. So middle school, high school, you spent in Savannah?
Yes.
What schools did you go to?
When I came here, started at Spencer Elementary.
Okay.
From Spencer Elementary, then I went to high school at Johnson High School. I think left Johnson last year, went to Beach, and that's where I graduated from, is Beach High School.
Tell us a little bit about growing up, that time in Savannah, what neighborhood you were living in, what it was like.
Well, I was living on the east side. Actually, the address was on East Paulson Street, right at the corner of Paulson and East Gwinnett Street. Obviously, it was a low-income neighborhood, completely segregated African-American. So was all of the schools and so forth, but I guess when you grow up in that environment, you get used to it. So it was, as far as I was concerned, it was normal. I think I worked as a kid, at least when I was going out, Spencer and of course at Johnson. So I worked at M&M Supermarket on East Gwinnett Street. There's a Kroger there today, but it was M&M when I worked there. The owner was a young man named Norton Malava. His mother started it from a corner grocery store, which sort of is an inspiration that I grew up under, because after I finished school, went into the military, came back to Savannah, I opened up a couple of stores, which were convenience stores. And I think that's where I got that inspiration from, because I saw him do that pickup from his mother and went on. And of course, at the time I left, he had at least a couple of supermarkets under his belt. So I was always very impressed with that and impressed with him as an individual.
Okay. So I'm going to circle back to your convenience stores. What military branch did you serve with?
Army.
The Army? And how long were you in the Army for?
2 years.
2 years?
Yes.
Where did you spend your service time?
Actually, mostly stateside. I did go, I had a stint in the Dominican Republic once there was a little shake-up down there when Castro wanted to come in to Miami and so forth, and come through the Dominican Republic. We went down to hold that, and otherwise it was all stateside. Started out at Fort Jackson, then went down to Fort Benning for jump school, then went up to Fort Bragg for my entire stay was at, up at Fort Bragg.
So you come back and you get in with the convenience stores. Is that your first entree into being an entrepreneur?
It was, yes. But in between or in conjunction with all of that, of course, then I entered Savannah State and went to school. I went to college at the same time. I just did a myriad of things, so sometimes I wonder how I probably missed being a scholar student by doing all of that, but I figured I didn't have time, so I had to hurry.
What did you study at Savannah State?
Business.
Business.
Yes.
Well, that makes sense. I meant to ask you what your parents' names were.
My father's name is Peter Jackson, and my mother's name is Mariah Jackson, who passed when I was 2 years old.
Oh, okay.
And of course, then I had a wonderful stepmother from that time on, and her name was Lasha, L-A-S-H-I-A.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Were there, other than your parents, were there certain people that you looked up to when you were growing up as mentors?
Well, yes. Once I came back from the military, Clifford Hodgwick became sort of a person that was a lot of inspiration to me, because at that time I wasn't sure what I was going to do, whether I was going to stay in the street, whether I was going back to school, exactly what I was going to do. And we met, and he said, "Where have you been? Haven't seen you in a while." And I said, "Well, Cliff, I've been in the military." And he said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." "What are you going to do now?" I said, "I'm not sure. I imagine just go back to work." When I left, I was working for an insurance company. I said, "My old boss has called me and said, come back. I still got your job." And I said, "So I'm thinking of going back." And he said, "Oh, that's great, but what else are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm not sure yet." He said, "What about school?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And so he encouraged me at the time. He said, "Well, you need to continue to go to school. You was not a bad student, so I think you do well." So I took his advice, and of course he was a person that was very active in the community, very encouraging for students or anyone who was around him. And I admired that a lot, and so he became quite an inspiration in terms of kind of how it shaped my life. He and I served in the same church together, so he was always an influence.
What church was that?
The AME church. I'm over at St. Luke AME. He was at St. Philip on the Boulevard.
So let's talk about how you got involved in local politics and what led you down that path.
I was extremely active as a result of Mr. Law, Wesley Law. He was another great influence, who encouraged all of us, particularly encouraged young folks to get involved in NAACP activities. So I became active in NAACP, and if you got active, Wesley wanted to make sure you worked. So anything he thought I could do, he just said, "Here, go take this." And of course gave me leadership roles when I was not even sure that I could handle them. So one of the main committees that I chaired was a labor committee that had the responsibility of following up on employee complaints. And so I served on that committee with a chair named Reverend Ben Gay. Reverend Gay retired and of course moved away from Savannah, went to Atlanta. And Wesley said, "Okay, that's your committee." And I said, "Wesley, I'm not sure I can handle that." He said, "Oh yeah, you can take care of it." So I became very active in community activities as a result of being involved in NAACP. And that kind of prepared the notion of politics, but it was no great study for politics. It just, kind of get thrust upon you. I got called one evening because we had an organization that was not an NAACP organization, but everybody thought it was because it was called the NAACP Political Advisory Council, but they were totally separate organization. But they worked together. The officers in one was officers in the other ones and so forth. Gene Gadsden was a longtime chairman of the political advisory council. And I got called one evening and said, oh, you know, we're having a political advisory council meeting this afternoon. And you need to come because we're going to be selecting candidates to run for city council. And you ought to offer for that position. And I said, really? And they said, yeah. So I was at work. At that time, I had a service station that was pretty active and so forth. So I left work, went to the meeting, and I got nominated to be a candidate. And you had to get nominated and you had to win. That's how you got the Political Advisory Council support. So you had to win in that organization. So I got nominated and I won over 3 other candidates and became a candidate. And with that, I joined the Rosakis administration. Or at that time, it was his team because he was running for re-election. And so I became a member of his team and ran for city council for the first time with John Rosakis.
Talk a little bit about Rosakis and being part of that team.
Well, it was very interesting. John was an experienced politician, for one thing. He had several of us who were first-timers. As you have mentioned, Bose, Brooks and I were the 2 new ones, and we were the youngest. I was the youngest African-American to be elected to public office. And I'm not sure Brooks was the youngest, but I think he also was the youngest to be elected. But we were the youngest on with the Rosakis administration. And I guess John was able to mentor us, even though there were other council persons on there who had been on there at least for 4 years. I was on there with Bose Ford, who was the first African-American to serve on city council. But it was a very cohesive working group. And they tell me that they was more cohesive until I got there. They said, well, you were young and you were kind of the rabble-rouser. And maybe so, only because I asked more questions than the rest of them. But never in a destructive manner. And I was always advised that you can raise questions, you can gather information, but we can't do things alone. So at some point, there got to be a purpose for the questions. You got to be a purpose for what you do, and you got to get other folks to go along. So you got to work in the group, and so that sort of became the motto, is that we need to work as a group, and we worked extremely well as a result of that. But we communicated well. We didn't have a meeting without, especially a formal meeting, without coming together, studying what was on the agenda, and of course, becoming apprised of what we needed to do. And I have to admit, with the city manager we had at the time, which was Don Mendoza, he always had a focus on the city and on the overall city. Don and I used to have conversations, and he would say, Roy, we can do anything. We can get just about anything done as long as we're talking about the city, as long as we're talking about the overall city, not about this person or this area alone, because we're going to address the problems. If this area has problems, then we're going to focus on the problems. And he was an excellent person to work with. So it became a very cohesive and good working environment for the 8 years that I served with it now.
So you already mentioned that Bose Ford was the first African American elected to city council as an alderman. So you come in not long after him. That was 1970. You come on in 1974. So that's still, new for the community to have African Americans on city council. Did you feel pushback from people? Was that still a difficult transition, that for you to be on the cutting edge, or be on the front lines of making, breaking that ceiling? Yes, we got some, I don't know if I want to call it pushback or jealousy, but there was some of that of course I encountered, and obviously Bose encountered.
when he became a member of City Council. But I think the fortunate thing is, and much different from the way it is now. Now, activeness is scattered all over the place. Back then, it was more organized, and the organization that was in the forefront of it was the NAACP. So we worked well with the NAACP, and NAACP worked extremely well with the community and was the voice of the community. Believe it or not, the people listened to the voices of NAACP. So if there was a problem, there was an issue to come up, then we had a focus place. We had a focal point to go through, and of course get advice, make the community aware of what was coming up, get advice in terms of how we ought to address this and so forth. So it made it, I clearly understand it made it much easier than what it is today. Because the mayor at that time kind of used the same avenue. If there was a community issue that needed to be dealt with, he was going to the leadership first before he went around the community. He'd go to the leadership first, and that made his job much easier.
Okay. Well, while we're still talking about Bose a little bit, just tell us, like, what was he like as a person? I think it's important.
Bose was a quiet individual, very intelligent individual. He was a professional business person. And I think the reason why he got along so well is because of his demeanor, his mannerism. He has the ability to work with other folks. And he had a view, as I grew into, he had a view for working for the community, for the city. You couldn't hardly tell the difference in what Bo had a special interest in if he was on city council than any of the other ones. They worked very well together. He and I got along extremely well because I learned quickly that Bose Ford had earned a lot of respect out of the other guys, and I decided that my best course of action and my direction ought to be to stay under his tutelage. So if I wanted something, I would always say to the mayor that, well, my senior alderman has said so-and-so. So if it's okay with him, it's okay with me. And so I sort of stayed under his wings. I didn't try to step out too far. If I wanted something, I would let him know that Bose, I think we ought to look at this or that. And if he agreed, believe me, that carried a lot of weight. Yes.
So there was another alder person I wanted to ask you about that also was kind of, broke a ceiling, and that was in your second term. That was Harris Lentini, who was our first elected female alder person. Tell us about Harris.
Harris was another wonderful person, and she was the first. But quite frankly, believe it or not, she was the first, but she still was a minority. Harris probably got more pushback than I got when I joined city council. So as a result of that, we became very close on city council because I made it a point of working very close with Harris. She had issues, she had things that she wanted to see get done. And we were able to work very closely together on those things. So it gave her some support, gave her some leverage because, we were, I won't say always on her side, but we pretty much listened to her.
So an important thing happened between your two terms. We went to the district system. Explain why that happened and how it changed the makeup of city council.
Well, it was, I guess it was done sort of as a strategy. We knew when we discussed it and we talked about it that if we went to districts, we were going to be able to elect more, a larger variety of individuals to city council. So, and so that was, that was the main reason, for doing it. And I was trying to think of the year exactly, but we decided, and I think it was probably at the time during the census when everything was being redistricted. And of course, it was coming up to the new term coming up, and of course, we wanted it done before the new election came up. So, we sat and discussed it, and of course, took it to the community and got community buy-in to it. A few of us, after we decided on the direction that we were going, we had to go to the Justice Department and get the Justice Department approval, because we had to comply with Voting Rights Act issues and all of that. And I was one of those that, of course, went to Washington on behalf of, in support of that plan. And of course, we got it approved, and of course, it worked. And I think during the first year, I ran, I was at large. Then my second term, I ran from a district. So I ran from the first district. A young man named Leon Chaplin ran from the second district, and of course, got on city council. And it just kind of expanded from there. And of course, we knew it would, because of the demographics of the city, that others would eventually be elected to city council.
So what do you consider in your 2 terms some of the major accomplishments of the administrations you worked with?
We I think one of the probably the biggest projects that we undertook when I joined city council, we had a program called the Model Cities Program. And one of the things, of course, we wanted to do was pave all of the unpaved cities in the city of Savannah. And there were a lot of unpaved streets, I don't know what I'm saying, cities, but unpaved streets in the city of Savannah. Most of those unpaved streets were in the Black communities. And so it became the goal of the Recycles administration to pave all of the unpaved streets in Savannah. Thanks to Jimmy Blackburn, we worked out a way where we could do a regular bond issue, I think of about $2 million, something like that, to support the street paving projects. And we paved all of the unpaved streets in the city of Savannah. That was one of the big achievements. The other one at the same time came the redevelopment of River Street. That was revitalized and was reworked during our administration, which became a focus of the downtown, and that's kind of what helped jump the tourism off downtown. Was that redoing? I'm saying Broaden Street, we did that too, but River Street was the main one that helped jump down the tourism off downtown. Of course, the other one was Broaden Street. We did the first redevelopment program on Broaden Street, and that was to help maintain and stabilize the businesses on Broaden Street, because a lot of the major stores had started leaving and going out to the malls and so forth. So we wanted to do what we could in order to keep to draw traffic downtown and keep those businesses downtown. So we did the first project of redeveloping, beautifying, Broaden Street. I think the other one for me, because I was very involved in this one, was the fact that during my second campaign, I think it was during my second campaign, I started advocating against crime in the city of Savannah, because because we had a rise in the crime in the city, and it was kind of growing. So I was very concerned about that and advocated against that. Most of the crimes at that time was domestic. When we took a look at it, I think the first year we had like 51 killings in the city, and most of those were related. They were families. And so I advocated, and as a matter of fact, I just blurted out at a city council meeting that, Mr. Mayor, I think we can do something about this. I said, it doesn't make sense for us to just let this keep growing and we don't do anything about it. I got a call after that meeting from a lady who was the wife of our Park and Tree commission. He was the director, and they had just moved here from Illinois. And she called me and said, yes, you can, because we had that problem up in Illinois. And she said, what we did up there was created a committee. And I came back and talked to Johnny about it, and we proposed that we develop we called it what do we call it? Anyway, we developed a committee that would address just a domestic, and it would call it the Domestic Violence Committee. That's what it was called. It was chaired by a young man from Armstrong who was a Dr. McGatlin, was in, I think, criminal justice out at Armstrong, and he was the chair of that committee. And that committee worked. And the numbers on domestic violence went down to almost zero after several years. It went down to zero. And that's why I became very convinced that when you got a crime problem, if you identify what the roots of it is, that you can do something about it. The other part of it was a crime related to drugs, and we created a drug task force at that time as well, and that's where the CNT came from, the county narcotics team, because when we created it here in the city, then the other municipalities said, well, oh no, but you know what you all are doing? Sure, you're doing a great job of pushing it out of the city, but you're pushing it over on us. You're pushing, and truly, we were running it out of the city, but it was just going out on the, in the fringes, going to the other municipalities. So to address that, then we came together and created CNT, County Narcotics Unit, to address the whole county. And of course, got control of that, for a while. And I advocate today that we can do more about crime than we're doing. It's just not, in my opinion, being addressed properly.
So City Council has 3 employees that work directly for them. You've talked about Don Mendonza as a city manager under your administration. You've mentioned Jimmy Blackburn. He was city attorney for so many years. Right. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on the legacy you think Mr. Blackburn left behind? Probably
tremendous. Jimmy was, of course, city attorney when I came in. He was probably more of a politician than any of the rest of us on city council. He and Johnny was very good friends. When Johnny got elected, Johnny came over from the county and of course ran for mayor and became mayor. We did so well in terms of legal issues with the city because Jimmy Blackburn wrote most of the city ordinance. And I used to ask Jimmy, I said, Jimmy, you don't ever stack up your desk with the books like most of the other attorneys when they come up. And he said, no, I don't need them. I said, why is that? He said, Roy, I wrote most of the stuff. So I already know what they're talking about, when they come up. So So unless it was something real strenuous and kind of outside of the direct purview of the city, then he handled it. He could take care of it. If it was outside of that, he might bring in outside lawyers. We eventually, probably because I kept nudging him to bring in other guys, he hired some assistants. He brought in Bill Sherrouse and Attorney Clarence Martin at the time. Clarence is deceased now, but those were the first two assistant city attorneys. Clarence, of course, was an African American, and Bill Sherrouse, was the other one. After Bill, there was another one. I can't know why I forgot his name, but we had a third one too to serve as an assistant city attorney. But Jimmy had a focus, and he and Don was almost coincided with each other. They both was very concerned about the city and where the city was going, and had a focus, for the city of Savannah. Jimmy legally was not going to let anything happen to the city to harm it. If he could prevent it, it was not going to happen. And believe me, given his experience, it was not going to happen. I've seen him in environments, and I've always thought that Jimmy was probably one of the best municipal attorneys in the state. I mean, I've seen anybody else who could handle municipal work better than Jimmy Blackburn. And he was a very fair-minded individual. So he was a person that was extremely valuable to us in terms of giving advice, but for the city of Savannah.
And then the third person that worked for council would be the clerk of council. Do you recall who was clerk when you were on council?
I think the young lady's name was Mrs. Gottlieb.
Sophie Gottlieb? Sophie
Gottlieb, yeah. She was a sweet person. Worked for the mayor worked in the mayor's office, because Johnny finally told us, because I asked him one day, I said, Johnny, don't you think we need staff designated to city council members? And he said, no. Why are you asking that? I said, well, everybody in the clerk's office, they always said they're working for the mayor. I said, we have stuff that we want to request and want to get folks to do. So there ought to be somebody in there designated for the alderman. And he said, no, they all are for, when you say city council, Roy, that's all of us. So they work for all of us. And there was no doubt about that. You could call Sophie for anything you needed, and she was going to respond to you just like she would the mayor. And she was that kind of person for the whole time that I served on city council and that she worked in there. She was just marvelous. Always ran very smooth, no matter who came in. She was very even-handed with them. There was no difference. It didn't make any difference to her. She said, I'm not the politician. I'm not the politician. I'm just here to do the work. Yes.
So why did you leave city council? Did you run again, or did you decide not to run again?
No, I ran again and got defeated. That's really the reason, which was going to be my last term anyway, but I got defeated at that time. So, and as a matter of fact, I was defeated by Floyd Adams. We can't believe it, but but it happened. But as somebody said, well, that's what happens when you get cocky. Say, when you think you can't lose, that's when you lose. And that's just about what it was. We started that campaign, and everybody in the city said, you can't lose that. You're not going to lose that campaign. So we sat on it. And I ran into a guy after it was over with, because after the primary, I decided to run as an independent. And I was out in the street working, and a guy ran up to me and said, you know what, Jackson? I said, yes, sir. I voted for you every time you ran. I thought you were the best guy on city council. He said, but I didn't vote for you this time. And I said, why not? I'm the same guy. He said, you acted like you didn't want it. If you had been out here in the streets before doing what you're doing now, he said, you would have won. And I met another guy who said, Roy, he said, I'm a Democrat. And I said, but you voted for me. He said, I'm a Democrat. And that's all he kept saying, I'm a Democrat. So I was running as an independent. He said, I'm a Democrat. So they were right. We just kind of, but it was amazing during the campaign. Every survey we ran, every survey we took, it was just overwhelming, but surveys don't tell it all sometimes.
Yeah, we know
Still
that.
got to put the work into it.
So aside from your service as an alderman, tell us about your career and life since then.
It's probably been good. I didn't, well, in 82, let's see, I was 74 to what, 80?
You left 82 is when you left.
Yeah, in 82, in the upcoming election, in 82, I ran for mayor against Johnny, 16-year incumbent. So, you get a lesson on that too, but.
So you and Brooks Stillwell ran against Rousakis in that election.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think Brooks ran the next term, though. We didn't run at the same time. He ran the next term. And it was a very intense campaign. I did much better in the campaign for mayor than I did running for alderman that year. There were 3 of us running for mayor that term. And Johnny and I got in a runoff. That's what propelled our Harris Lentini to run for mayor. It's because when I got in a runoff with Johnny, then as it usually happens, then everybody, before that, they say you're invincible, you can't be beat. But when I got in a runoff, then they said, oh yeah, there are weaknesses there. But Johnny got beat because of a crime spree led by a young man named Ricky Gibbons. Ricky Gibbons was killing people all over the city. And in the height of the campaign, I think the last couple of months of the campaign, he killed 1 or 2 people downtown, 1 out in Midtown, and 1 in Ardsley Park, and that was the killer. That was the one that did him in, is when he killed a person out in Ardsley Park. So those kind of things will get you, and which you had no control of it, at the time. So that's how Harris Lentini beat Johnny. But when Johnny and I ran together, the difficult part about that is same things he ran on, I was running on, because I really didn't divorce myself from the work of the team. I couldn't find anything negative to say about Johnny, and he couldn't find much to say negative about me, except that maybe it's just not his time yet. He should have waited a little longer. But it was a good experience. From that, I just went back and went to work, which I think my brothers were pretty pleased with. So I started giving, businesses a lot more time, and so we started doing a lot more work. We started growing more, and so that's where I've spent the remainder of my years.
And we still see you around City Hall with one of those businesses.
Yes, it's because a part of my business was towing and recovery. And that, as a result of that, we got on the city's head-out list. And we've been there. I was even on there when I was on city council because it was a no-bid process. It was a rotation list, and they call you by rotation, so the decisions who car you towed and so forth never came to City Hall, so we had nothing to do with that. And Jimmy said, well, you're not going to make a decision about that, so there's no reason for you to give that up. So we continued with it. So when I left City Council, we continued with that. And the city mail service used to be in-house. There was a staff to do city mail service. It was all in-house. And I don't know if I told the city manager or the lady that was running in charge of the mail service.
Carol.
No, that was before Carol. Yeah, I just told him, I said, I think we can do this better by privatizing it than in-house and cheaper. And so they created an RFP for that. We competed for it. We bid on it, and we won it, and we've had it ever since. I don't know how many years that have been now, but I know it's a lot of them. Yeah, so we've had it ever since.
Been here as long as I've been working here. So.
Yes, yes. Oh, well, I was here long before you because when Mrs. Anderson was director of the municipal library, I was doing it then. She was here, so.
So I just have 2 questions left for you. So just looking back on your life, so this doesn't have to be as an alderman, just being here in Savannah, what are you most proud of?
I think that we've done. I think that we've done well as a city. I guess I'm a little biased, but I thought through the Rosakis administration, through the whole time that Don was still city manager, and of course then on the Michael, I think the city grew and advanced very well, and certainly was on the right track in terms of becoming a much more broader and progressive city than I think we are right now. I think in the last 12 years or so, maybe a little longer than that, maybe 18, I think our growth has, when I say our, I mean the city, has been stunted some. I just think, somehow we lost focus on where we were going and what we should be doing as a city. And so, so I think we've lost a lot, in that regards. As far as the broader community, I think we developed along the way a better working relationship with the broader community. When I mean particularly entire community. I think minority businesses and the major businesses, I think all started working better together. And of course, I think that was by design. I know there was an effort before I left City Council in order to do that. So there were those kind of relationships developed. Industrial, recruiting and that kind of stuff became community rather than just kind of segmented in one area or the other. Whenever a firm was solicited to come into Savannah or Chatham County, the industrial solicitors made sure that they understood the makeup of the community and that there was a broader community. So the businesses came in was stronger and were more community oriented, in my opinion, than what they were, before. So, and I still think that continues a lot today. I just don't think we get as much out of it. We don't take we don't take advantage of it as much as we can and should. The port has been magnificent. I was asked about the port before I even knew what it was all about. I was in a meeting in Washington and met some guys, and they started talking about the port, and I said, "Port?" They said, "Yeah, your port. You got 30-foot channel and all of that. So y'all got a deep waterway." And I said, "What?" I had no idea what they were talking about. But after that, I came back and decided to start learning more about what we had. So, it's been just a major resource for the community. So I just think that we could have been a lot further along than we are. So on one hand, I'm disappointed about some things, but other things I'm very, very, very pleased with.
All right, so here's the last one. Is there anything that you want to add about the city, about Savannah, your family, your career that we haven't covered?
Just one, perhaps, and that is, which should have been mixed up in some of the others, but we have a community that has the ability and the wherewithal to work together even though sometimes it may not seem like it, but the core of this community will come together on behalf of this community. If you're working on behalf of the community, it will come together and work for this community. And really it doesn't matter what the project is. It can be a project that has more of an African American flow or a general flow. If it's for the good of the community, it'll come together and work on it. When we renamed West Broad Street from West Broad to M.L. King Boulevard, we have folks on both sides of that. But even on an issue like that, we were able to come together and the reason for that is that because the historic folks said, no, West Broad is the boundaries for the historic district, particularly on the west side. So we made the argument, well, in the records it's still West Broad Street, but we can name it M.L. King Boulevard. We debated that for a while, but eventually we came together on that, and it was done and supported, and we just moved on. Those kind of things seems to be harder to do now but that's global, that's national, so I can't just say it relates to Savannah. But I just think, and I don't want to be critical, but I think given the I guess lack of another term, given the right leadership, and it's all still here. It's all still here. Good.
Well, I want to thank you for your service and your time today and sitting down with us. And I think this has been wonderful. Thank you.
Well, I've enjoyed it.
Great.
Thank you all.